The legal requirements of building can be quite complicated. Most people are familiar with planning permission, but when it comes to building regulations, there's a lot of confusion. These standards are legally binding, affecting all new building works for homes. They cover a huge range of things from structure, fire, ventilation, energy conservation, accessibility, and many others.
Part M of the building regulations is the part that deals with access for people to buildings. So the main regulation is that people should be able to access and use buildings, and in the case of housing, that housing and dwellings should be visitable by people with disabilities, which doesn't necessarily mean that they should be designed and constructed so that they can be, say, fully used by a wheelchair user, but rather that everybody should be able to visit their neighbours and their family in any new dwelling. There has been a general perception that Part M of the building regulations is not working, that it's not being enforced, and that people are continuing to have quite significant difficulties in accessing and using buildings.
The National Disability Authority commissioned Fionnuala to conduct a survey on accessibility in housing.
So we focused on single units in rural areas. We also looked at houses in some urban areas. And what we found is very low levels of accessibility. Now, it's not a kind of a full-scale survey of Ireland as a whole in housing, but it does show consistently that access issues continue, even though we have Part M regulations in place.
Enforcement of building regulations is carried out by each local authority's building control section. However, it's not like the planning system, where all applications must be submitted and then approved.
We don't inspect every dwelling. The national recommended target is 12 to 15% of dwellings for inspection. Here in Fingal County Council, we would inspect of the order of 24% of dwellings in the county.
The majority of new homes throughout the country are not inspected by building control, but left to the builder-developer to self-certify by engaging their own expert when completed and when everything is covered up.
In order to inspect every aspect of all dwellings, it would require a substantial number of additional resources. One would have to start at the design stage, check the drawings, go to site development stage, floor construction, each individual level of construction to final finish.
Without the provision of adequate resources for county councils to inspect all dwellings, it's easy to see why regulations may not be adhered to. But if you have issues with accessibility, this can make it very hard to find somewhere to live. Avril and Keith are renting this apartment in the city centre. They were lucky to find a place that complied with Part M, but it still needed some adaptations in the bathroom.
Well, accessibility was probably the biggest issue. One, could I get into the building? And then after that, it was door widths. Bedroom size was another big factor, because as you can see, I'm in a power chair. It's quite big. I also have a manual chair, so at any one time I have 2 chairs in the apartment. The next thing was the bathroom had to be big enough and accessible. Then after that, location was another factor. In terms of work, I need to be on an accessible bus route. And in terms of just simple things like food shopping, going out for an evening, I needed to be somewhere that I could get to all these places easily.
Well, when Part M is implemented effectively, what you'll see is a level access to a building, to a house. You'll also see a toilet, requirement for a toilet on ground level. But often that isn't sufficient, because what you'll find is fixtures and fittings aren't accessible. Doorways mightn't be wide enough for certain types of wheelchairs. The area for mobility within the toilet area mightn't be sufficient.
For example, a bathroom, the door would open in, and for me it'd be better if the door opens out, because once you're in that space you now have to try and close the door, and that can be quite difficult when you're trying to wrap your chair around the door, you know. Those kind of things, that would probably be the thing that annoys me the most.
They're now very happy with their current home and landlady, who agreed to the bathroom adaptation. But it wasn't easy to find this place. They were previously let down badly by a letting agent who accepted a deposit from them and then reneged on the deal. Even though all costs would be covered, the owner decided that the adaptations would be too much hassle and backed out when it came to signing a lease.
We didn't know why. We didn't know why exactly. We had a fair idea between ourselves, but we're just very furious and a little bit upset about it as well, because we've been looking for quite a while, and we thought, you know, finally we found a place. it's ideal. We're very excited about it, and then just to have it all taken away from you in the space of a day is just very annoying, frustrating.
So, Part M, when it's enforced, greatly improves things. But could we do a little better in terms of accessible housing?
Now, there's new legislation coming on stream which will provide for disability access certificates. The problem is, in the new legislation, it only applies to apartment buildings. Now, what that would mean is if the apartment didn't comply with accessibility, they wouldn't be allowed to open the building.
Both in the private and in the public sector, we should be building a percentage of houses that are fully accessible from the outset. I don't think all housing should be built to be fully wheelchair accessible. Yes, it should be built to be adaptable and easily changed.
I mean, a little bit of consideration, a little bit of forward planning to think who actually is going to be renting these apartments. I don't think it's too much to ask for.
Next time, I'll be back in Ina, County Clare, to see how Alan Galvin's Thatch Cottage extension is progressing. Angie is revisiting a renovated lockhouse in Shannonbridge, County Offaly. And I look at some of the social and affordable housing issues in Ireland today.